If we don't take into account the whole data modeling perspective of our Power BI reports, this can be a huge problem. In the end, it's funny because some people are just then creating the reports, they are putting lots of fancy visuals in there, but they didn't think about the whole data model perspective. So then what? Yeah, so then if you don't pay attention to this kind of things, you can have problems like, let's think about, for instance, security. Yeah, so security is a big topic. Yeah, that's definitely making a huge difference for everyone that wants to share data, share information. And if you don't have a proper data model that was built already thinking about the whole security implementation, this will be a pain. Yeah, I can tell you. I mean, just think about now that you're doing this whole development and you didn't think about security, everything is working fine, and then suddenly you need to make a huge change. Because right now you need to implement such a thing, and this won't simply work. Yeah. Besides that, we do have things that people are not really taking into consideration. What are the data types we have in our data sets? What are the relationships that we can find here? Which dimensions we have? What are the fact tables we can derive from this data set we are currently consuming? Yeah, and this kind of things, it's really complicated, because if you do not start to think about this and you're just delivering the information in a completely random way because that's how you'd like to see it, then this can be tricky, because now your data set might be first only serving to one purpose, which is this report you have created, and it's not something that's going to be easily scalable. Yeah, so this means people cannot reuse that, and this is quite sad. Yeah, because you put some work in there and people are not going to use that. So in the end, thinking about the proper structures and going for something like a star schema, which is one of the best approaches, yeah, for in terms of performance as well, and everything related, even for the development of calculations and measures, where you're going to be using DAX for that, you're going to suffer if you do not have a proper data model. Yeah, so it's really important that you put some time in there. Try to think about that even before you start the whole development, and then you're going to have something cool that you can really leverage, and then even share with your colleagues and even the users who are interested in building reports on their own. Neglecting security, yeah, on Power BI development, this is definitely a big issue. Yeah, we should be paying attention to this from scratch. Yeah, as soon as you start a report, try to think who is going to be consuming this report. Yeah, which kind of access do the different user groups should have to your data? Can everyone really see everything that you have in there, or do you need to have some kind of barriers here? Yeah, do you need to limit this somehow? Yeah, and if that's the case, then keep this in mind, because if you do not make a proper development on your data model, this might be really complex to take into account in the future. Yeah, having the security implemented using things like row level security, object level security, and so on, this might make a huge difference, because this is how you can really control who is going to have access to what, and this can avoid problems like even data leakage, yeah, or not only related to the whole data access part, but it's really important that you pay attention to it. Sometimes, of course, we do have the whole human resource part as well, that some people can just get problems with the data just because they're using it in the wrong way, or in the wrong environment. Fine, but at least the part that you can develop, which is the technical part, be sure to do it, because otherwise we're going to have problems in the future. So not considering the user requirements or feedback proposed from the client during the process of development, this can be really tricky. I mean, we try to avoid that just by going with a very simple approach, which is what we call the mockups. Yeah. So we create mockups for our reports, and we also tend to go in the so-called approach, the top-down approach. What do I mean with that? We are just basically creating our reports based on something that we know what we want to achieve. Before we even talk about data, where is the data coming from, how should we going to query this data, how we're putting everything together. These questions will come after, but at first we need to understand, okay, this is what we want to deliver, this is what we should get to in the end, and that's exactly what we follow, right? And in this moment, we are getting the very first feedback, and we are also getting the very first impression from the client perspective, what is expected as a final result, yeah? This should be repetitive, yeah? So whenever we're working together with a client, for instance, we tend to have a weekly basis meetings, yeah? And during those weekly basis meetings, we are always checking where we are in terms of development. Is it really still making sense to you, and so on. I mean, we are applying, of course, the whole agile methodology is being taken into account, of course, for this kind of discussions that we have with the clients. But again, having this moment where you sit and you get the feedback and you understand if this is going the right direction, this is definitely a must, because if you don't do so, I mean, in the end, what you're going to deliver is just garbage, yeah? The performance optimization is definitely a very important topic when it comes to the whole Power BI development, yeah? You need to keep this in mind because, again, depending on how you create your report, you're going to suffer in the near future, yeah? And this is always the case. You need to try to think in a perspective that you are not only thinking about the current solution, what you're going to deliver today, but try to think how is this solution behaving in a month, in a year, in 2 years, 5 years. Try to at least put some thoughts on it. Not that you're going to have a perfect solution, but at least you're going to take into account a few things that might make a huge difference for the performance. Yeah, things that can be relevant, for instance, is to think that it's important that you do some indexing on your databases. Yeah, depending on how you're querying the data, of course. It's also important that you pay attention to the creation of your tables in there for your data model, because if you don't do it properly, you're just putting like a single table with thousands of columns in one single table. This won't make like a lot of sense. And once you start to create your calculations, your features, your functionalities on the report, you will see that you have some limitations. Yeah, and this can be really tricky if you don't pay attention to that in the beginning, because again, it's only a monster that is evolving, and if you don't don't work with it properly, then of course you're going to face this issue in the near future. Yeah. So data modeling here is definitely a game changer for the whole performance. Of course, you can have some issues when it comes to the whole DAX formulas, so the queries that you are writing over your report, and those queries. This is something that you also can benefit a lot just by paying attention to very small best practices topics. Yeah. So this is the kind of things that we can definitely support with. So documentation is also a very important topic. Yeah. Whenever we talk about documentation, this is something that sometimes is just neglected. Yeah. People are just not doing it. And this is bad because even for you, if you're working alone on your project, imagine that you just developed the whole thing, you finished it, and then after 6 months, you need to do something there again. Yeah. This is a hassle, right? So you need to really remember everything you did. You need to think about all of the calculations you wrote. And if you don't have proper documentation, come on, this would be quite tricky to follow, yeah? And again, we're always talking about collaborative work environments. So in this kind of scenario, having a documentation is a must, yeah? This also gives a little bit of transparency to the client. So this would make it easier for the client to understand what did we do and how did we do it, yeah? So this is, again, not only the process of making it transparent, to make it useful for me in the future, for my colleagues, but also making it in a way that people can use this documentation to learn. So they can really use it and say, okay, now I understand how the different data sets are defined, where the data is coming from, how often are they updated, and this kind of questions, ideally, you should be answering in your documentation. Yeah? Besides that, having documentations about the whole report itself and having things like a glossary explaining the different terms you can find in there and so on and so forth. So all of these things, if you put all of them together in a nice way and you convey all of the documentation and information and share this nicely, then everyone can really benefit from it. To avoid mistakes whenever you are developing your DAX formulas, yeah, regardless if it's for calculated table, calculated columns, or for measures, yeah, ideally you need to be paying attention and understand exactly what you're writing in there, yeah. Some people tend to try to write formulas, DAX formulas, without even understanding what are the relationships existing between the different tables you find in your data model, yeah. And having this knowledge is super important because DAX is a really robust language, query language, but it can only be leveraged if you understand the so-called context. Yeah? So understanding the context and understanding exactly where these measures and calculations that you're creating are going to be used is really a game changer. And it's really making a difference here. Some people are sometimes just writing the formulas and then they do not think about all of the possible scenarios this formula could be applied on. And once they do that, then the numbers that are going to be delivered are actually misleading. They are wrong. Yeah? They are not really giving or reflecting the facts. Yeah? It's not real numbers. So then this kind of things, whenever you're working with DAX, you need to be really careful because otherwise you're going to be giving some information to your clients that are not making sense. So on the topic of scalability and extensibility of a Power BI report, yeah, we always need to keep in mind a few things that are super important, right? So whenever you think about your report, that's the thing. Do not think about this as a solution that is just working for now. Yeah? Try to think about how this is going to behave in the near future. What if you get new data sets? Yeah? What if you get new calculations, new columns here that must be included in your tables? what would be the process that you would need to follow in order to achieve these steps. Yeah? And this is really important that you try to have this kind of planned ahead, because if you do not have that, you're going to really face issues in the close future. And this is just something that we really need to pay attention to. Because again, whenever we have the situation of scalability, we need to think that sometimes it could be that you have enough resources already because you are just working with a specific size of data. But what if this data set starts to grow and grow and grow? And then how is your report going to handle this? You need to be prepared. So try to think about this beforehand, try to plan it, and then write this down, document everything, and then you're going to be on a good state.